He had been sitting quietly in the middle of the plane, near the window, almost invisible to everyone around him. He wasn't loud, he wasn't talkative, he wasn't even the type who looked up when the cabin crew passed by. He just sat with his hands together, looking outside at the endless sky. Most passengers didn't even notice him until everything went wrong. The flight had taken off smoothly. The kind of flight where people relax, open their snacks, watch movies, or simply sleep. The crew were calm, the weather was clear, and nothing looked unusual. People in the cabin were busy with their own world's small conversations, nervous laughs, tired faces trying to get some rest. The quiet passenger stayed in his seat, barely moving, as if he was trying to stay out of everyone's way. But at 30,000 feet, things changed so suddenly that no one even understood what was happening. The first sign was a strange sound from the cockpit. It wasn't loud, but enough for the front row passengers to turn their heads. A flight attendant rushed forward, opened the cockpit door halfway, and her face lost color. She whispered something to another crew member, and suddenly everything felt different. The calm feeling in the plane disappeared. Without making noise, fear entered the cabin like cold air. The flight attendant grabbed the intercom. Her voice tried to stay steady, but it shook slightly. Everyone heard it. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is anyone on board with flying experience, please come forward. We have an emergency. For a second, nobody moved. People looked at each other, confused. Why would they ask something like that? Then the words hit them. The pilot. Something had happened to the pilot. A soft panic started to rise. Mothers held their children. People who were sleeping woke up suddenly. Some passengers unbuckled their seatbelts to stand, but then sat back down, unsure what to do. No one spoke loudly, but the fear was there in their eyes. The quiet passenger stayed still. His head lowered slightly, as if he was thinking, not panicking like everyone else. He blinked slowly, then looked toward the front. But he didn't move. Someone from another row stood up, a businessman, then sat again, because he clearly had no idea how to fly a plane. The announcement came again, this time more urgent. If you have any flight experience, please come to the front. People started whispering who could help. There had to be someone, but no one stepped forward. The situation felt unreal. A plane high above the world, hundreds of lives at risk. And the person meant to guide them was unable to continue. Then a crew member came out of the cockpit. Her eyes red, holding a small device in her hand. She whispered something to another attendant, shaking her head as if the worst possibility was becoming true. The quiet passenger finally lifted his hands from his lap. He took a slow breath, the kind someone takes when they know the next step will change everything. But again, he didn't stand. Maybe he wasn't sure. Maybe he didn't want attention. Maybe he hoped someone else would go, but no one did. A woman started crying softly. A man clenched his seat armrest. Another person prayed under their breath. The plane felt heavy with the weight of so many fears at the same time. The quiet passenger looked down at his wristband, a simple, worn strap that carried something small but meaningful. He touched it gently with his thumb. It was the kind of gesture that showed a memory, a story behind it, something he didn't share with the world. Something that still lived with him even though he tried to keep it buried. The attendants made a third announcement. Their voices cracked now. Please, if someone knows how to fly, please come to the cockpit. The captain is unconscious and the co-pilot is trying to manage alone. That was when the quiet passenger finally stood. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't shout. He didn't rush. He just stood up slowly, as if he had been waiting for the exact moment to make sure he wasn't mistaken. He straightened his posture, adjusted his jacket, and walked down the aisle with calm steps. People moved aside, watching him with wide eyes. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know what he could do. All they knew was that he wasn't scared the way they were. There was something in his walk, steady, balanced, almost trained. When he reached the front, the crew looked at him with hope mixed with fear. "I can help," he said softly. The crew member asked, "Sir, have you flown before?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small folded card, and placed it gently into the attendant's hand. Her eyes widened as she read it. She looked up at him, again, not with fear now but with disbelief. "You're Viper?" The entire front row heard it. Passengers gasped. Some recognized the call sign instantly. It wasn't the name of an ordinary pilot. It wasn't the name of a learner. It belonged to someone far beyond that. A legend in a field most people only see in movies. The quiet passenger nodded once. Calm and steady. "I'll need the co-pilot to follow my lead," he said quietly. That was the moment the plane gained its first piece of hope. When the quiet passenger stepped into the cockpit, the atmosphere inside felt completely different from the cabin. The lights were dim, alarms blinked silently, and the co-pilot was breathing fast, trying to keep the aircraft steady with shaking hands. The captain lay slumped to the side, unconscious, his headset hanging loose. The co-pilot kept glancing between the controls and the emergency checklist, but it was clear he was overwhelmed. The quiet passenger stood behind him for a moment, taking everything in with calm eyes. He didn't panic, didn't freeze, didn't let emotion take over. Instead, he watched the screens like someone who had lived his entire life around them. The co-pilot finally noticed him and turned with relief and fear mixed in his expression. "Are you really Viper?" the co-pilot asked in a low voice, almost not believing the idea. The quiet passenger nodded once. "Yes, but we'll talk later. Tell me what's working and what isn't." The co-pilot swallowed hard. "We lost part of the autopilot system when the captain collapsed. His controls jammed when he fell, and I can't stabilize the altitude." Viper stepped forward, gently moved the co-pilot's hand aside for a moment, and placed his own on the yoke. His touch was steady, like he was greeting an old friend. The aircraft responded to him almost immediately, rising a little, leveling out. "Good," he murmured. "She's still listening." The co-pilot exhaled in disbelief. Outside the cockpit, passengers peeked nervously through the small gap in the door. They couldn't see much, but they saw just enough. His calm posture, the co-pilot stepping back, the alarms slowly fading. It gave them strength, like watching someone pull them back from the edge. In the cabin, whispers spread quickly. "Who is he? Did she say Viper? That call sign, isn't that military? Is he a real fighter pilot?" A little boy in the front row looked at his mother and asked softly, "Mama, are we safe now?" She didn't have the full answer, but for the first time since the emergency started, she nodded with hope. "He's helping," she whispered. "We might be." Inside the cockpit, Viper moved with gentle precision. He didn't rush, didn't make dramatic gestures. He just checked the altitude, adjusted the trim, and took a slow breath before speaking again. "We need to turn slightly east," he said. "Weather is clean there. And radio for ground guidance." The co-pilot nodded and began contacting air traffic control. Viper listened to the radio messages without interrupting, only correcting one detail when the frequency shifted. "You still remember all this?" the co-pilot asked quietly, almost amazed. "I never forgot," Viper replied in a soft voice. "Some things stay with you even when you try to walk away from them." The co-pilot didn't ask what he meant, but the emotion in those words lingered. It felt like Viper wasn't just a pilot. He was someone who had once carried heavy responsibilities. Someone who had stepped away from them for a reason the world didn't know. Meanwhile, in the cabin, tension softened a little. People were still scared, but now their fear was mixed with trust. The attendants kept moving down the aisle, calming nervous passengers, reassuring them, telling them help had arrived. The name Viper spread like a quiet rumor through the plane. giving people something to hold on to. But hope wasn't enough. The sky outside the windshield darkened slightly as clouds built ahead. The plane shook gently, nothing dangerous yet, but enough to remind them that they were still in trouble. Viper noticed it instantly. His eyes narrowed, sharp and focused. We need to get through that before it grows. Tell the cabin to prepare for light turbulence. The co-pilot made the announcement quickly, and passengers held onto their seats. Some closed their eyes. Others whispered prayers. A few looked forward, waiting for the next sound from the cockpit. Viper steadied the plane again, pushing slightly against the wind. The aircraft responded with a soft vibration, like it was fighting but willing to cooperate. Every movement he made looked effortless, but the co-pilot understood exactly how difficult it was. You're doing what two pilots usually do, the co-pilot said quietly. Viper didn't answer for a moment. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, watching every flicker of light, every shift of wind, every whisper of movement from the wings. Finally he said softly, "We'll get them home. All of them." The co-pilot nodded, trusting him completely. Back in the cabin, a sudden jolt shook the plane. People gasped, gripping armrests. The lights flickered once. A baby cried. Someone whispered, "Please, not now." Viper's voice came calmly over the speakers, steady like a lifeline. "We're going through a weather patch. Stay seated. You're safe." His tone made people believe it. Even the ones who usually panicked during flights felt a strange sense of comfort. Inside the cockpit, the turbulence increased. The plane tilted slightly right. The co-pilot tensed. "Should I?" "No," Viper said quietly. "Let me." He held the controls firmly, guiding the aircraft through the rough air, like someone guiding a frightened animal. The shaking slowly softened. The clouds faded behind them. And the sky opened again clear, wide, safe. The co-pilot let out a long breath. "How did you do that?" Viper looked straight ahead, a shadow of old memories passing in his eyes. "I've flown through worse." He didn't say how much worse, he didn't say why, he didn't say what he had survived. But the sky knew, and soon, the passengers would too. The turbulence had passed, but the cabin still felt tight with worry. People sat quietly, listening for every small sound from the front of the plane. Even though Viper had stabilized everything, fear didn't disappear easily at 30,000 feet. It stayed in the backs of their minds, whispering the question no one wanted to say out loud. What if something else goes wrong? But inside the cockpit, Viper's focus didn't waver. He kept watching the sky with sharp concentration, his hands steady on the controls. The co-pilot, now calmer, kept checking the instruments, almost looking at Viper the way a student looks at a teacher they never expected to meet. "Your reflexes, they're like mine used to be when I first trained," the co-pilot said quietly. Viper didn't look at him. "Flying isn't about speed," he replied. "It's about understanding what the sky wants from you." The co-pilot nodded, absorbing every word like it was the last lesson he would ever receive. Behind them, the cabin door cracked open slightly as a flight attendant peeked in. Her face was relieved but still unsure. "People want to know if we are safe," she whispered. Viper didn't turn. "Tell them this. We are heading towards stable air, and we're going home." The attendant nodded and closed the door gently. When she repeated his words to the passengers, you could almost hear the weight lifting off them. His voice, even when delivered through someone else, carried a strange power, steady, human, comforting dot. But the peace didn't last long. A sudden warning light blinked on the upper panel. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to make the co-pilot freeze for a moment. He leaned forward and stared at it. "Is that what I think it is?" he whispered. Viper glanced up, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was the kind of warning that made even trained pilots tense. The plane was slowly losing fuel pressure on one side. Not enough to panic the passengers yet, but enough for the cockpit to feel cold for a moment. How long has that been flickering? Viper asked. I'm not sure. It showed for a moment during turbulence, but then it stopped. Viper took a slow breath. Okay, don't worry. Not every warning means danger. But we need to be ahead of it. The co-pilot nodded while trying to mask his fear. Viper leaned forward and made a few adjustments, carefully balancing the fuel flow. His hands were precise, almost gentle, like someone adjusting the heartbeat of a living thing. The warning light softened but didn't fully disappear. We can manage this, he said calmly. But we'll need priority landing. The co-pilot immediately contacted air traffic control again, explaining the new situation. The voice on the other end grew more urgent and more respectful. They now understood who was flying the plane. The call sign Viper carried weight. As messages went back and forth, Viper took a moment to rest his eyes. Not because he was tired, but because he was remembering something heavy, something that lived inside him like a shadow. He didn't let the co-pilot or anyone else see it, but it was there, deep behind the calm surface. In the cabin, people reacted to every tiny movement under their feet. One small bump made someone gasp. Another made someone grip the seat in front of them, like it was the only thing keeping them alive. Boy, who had been quiet the entire flight, suddenly asked his father, "Why does that man talk like he already knows everything? Does he fly a lot?" His father looked unsure but answered, "Maybe he did. Maybe he still does. Maybe he just doesn't tell people." A few rows behind, a woman whispered to her husband, "What if he wasn't here? What would we do?" Her husband only shook his head. "We're lucky he is." Luck wasn't the right word, though fate was closer. Back in the cockpit, Viper made another careful adjustment, and the plane steadied again, but the warning light stayed. It wasn't dangerous yet, but it was like a reminder that the sky didn't always play fair. The co-pilot finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind since Viper walked in. "Why did you leave flying? If you were this good?" Viper didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed on the horizon, watching the distant clouds glow with faint sunlight. Then he spoke very quietly. "Every pilot has one flight they never want to remember." He paused. "And mine was the kind you don't walk away from without losing a piece of yourself." The co-pilot didn't ask anything else. Viper tightened his grip on the controls again and leaned forward. "But today, I'm here. And that's enough." Before the co-pilot could respond, another alert chimed, this time from the weather radar. The sky ahead didn't look so friendly anymore. The safe air they hoped for was slipping away. "Get ready," Viper said softly. "Part of the sky is changing. And we're going right into it." The co-pilot swallowed hard. The passengers had no idea yet, but the next few minutes would test everything: his skill, his past, and the reason he stopped flying. The cockpit grew quieter, almost too quiet, as the new alert faded into the background hum of the instruments. Viper's eyes stayed fixed on the shifting colors of the radar. A small patch of bad weather was growing ahead, stretching like a dark curtain across their path. It wasn't a storm strong enough to tear the plane, but it was unpredictable, the kind that could suddenly pull the aircraft down or push it up without warning. The co-pilot exhaled slowly. "We can go around it, but it will take longer," he said cautiously. "Longer is fine," Viper answered. "The important thing is keeping the passengers calm." He adjusted the controls slightly, preparing for a gentle turn. His movements were smooth, almost invisible. The co-pilot watched closely, learning silently, absorbing each small gesture. But then another detail appeared on the screen: wind speed. It was rising faster than expected. What should have been a small detour was turning into a difficult path. Viper didn't flinch. He simply read the sky the way a doctor reads a heartbeat. "We'll go above it," he said, "not around it." The phone. Co-pilot hesitated. That's risky with the fuel imbalance. Yes, Viper said quietly. But we have more control going up than sideways. Inside the cabin, passengers sensed the shift. A few felt the gentle climb and looked out their windows to see the wings angle upward. Some clutched their seats, some whispered, but most stayed silent, believing the calm voice they had heard earlier. A middle-aged man whispered to the attendant, "Is he still okay up there?" The attendant smiled softly. "He's steady. More steady than anyone I've ever seen." The man nodded, trying to trust her words. Back in the cockpit, Viper guided the climb. The plane rose slowly, like it was walking up invisible steps. The clouds thickened below them, turning white to gray to a darker shade that made the sky look heavy. The co-pilot glanced at Viper again. "Are you sure?" "Trust the climb," Viper replied. "She wants altitude." It sounded strange, too. The co-pilot, how Viper talked about the plane like it was alive, like it had feelings or instincts. But as the altitude increased, the turbulence eased a little. His instincts were right. For a moment, everything felt peaceful again. But then, the plane gave one sudden heavy drop, just a few feet, but enough to make every passenger gasp. Someone screamed softly. A tray rattled, and a cup rolled down the aisle. The lights flickered for a heartbeat. In the cockpit, Viper tightened his grip instantly, correcting the roll. The co-pilot steadied the engine output. That was the top edge of the wind, Viper muttered. "It's trying to push us down." The co-pilot's voice cracked. "Can we hold altitude?" "We don't hold it," Viper answered. "We fight for it." He pushed the controls gently, guiding the nose upward. The engines hummed louder, the whole plane trembling slightly. The co-pilot swallowed hard. He wasn't terrified, but he was close. "Altitude climbing," he said, checking the screen. "Slow but climbing." In the cabin, people held hands, held their breath, held onto anything they could. A little girl covered her ears while her mother hugged her tightly. A teenager who had been pretending not to be scared finally whispered, "Please, just let this end." The plane trembled again, less this time, more like a long exhale from the sky. Inside the cockpit, Viper let the controls settle. The engines steadied. The tremble faded. "We're clear," he said finally. The co-pilot leaned back with a long breath. "How did you know it would work?" Viper didn't answer right away. His eyes were distant again, as if he was remembering another flight, another sky, another moment when things didn't go so well. "Experience," he said softly. "And listening." The co-pilot turned to him. "Listening to what?" Viper looked at the horizon, the clean blue sky returning in front of them. "The plane," he whispered. "She always tells you what she needs, if you're calm enough to hear her." The co-pilot had no words. For a few minutes, silence returned. Not the fearful silence from earlier, but a gentler one. The plane finally settled into smoother air. The passengers unclenched their hands, looked around, and tried to breathe again. But just when calm began to settle, the radio crackled with a new message from air control. "Viper, be advised. We're tracking a system moving faster than expected near your landing path." The co-pilot's eyes widened. "Another one?" Viper didn't react with surprise. He simply exhaled slowly, like a man who had already expected the sky to bring more challenges. "We'll get through it," he said quietly. Then, for the first time during the entire flight, he closed his eyes for a moment, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Something personal, something heavy. The co-pilot noticed. "Are you okay?" Viper opened his eyes again, calm and sharp. "Yes, it's just, this sky feels familiar." "Familiar how?" Viper didn't answer, because somewhere deep inside he already knew this flight was leading him back to the memory he had tried to escape. Asterisk. The cockpit lights glowed softly as the radio message faded. Another weather system ahead, another test. Another reminder from the sky that nothing about this flight would be easy. The co-pilot felt his stomach tighten again, but Viper, he didn't flinch. He sat with the same calm posture, eyes steady, mind focused, yet something unspoken moved quietly behind his expression. The co-pilot finally asked, "What did you mean? This sky feels familiar?" For a long moment, Viper didn't answer. He didn't look away from the horizon, but his eyes softened, almost as if he was staring at something far older than the far clouds in front of them. "Because I've flown through something like this before," he said finally, his voice low. "The kind of sky that doesn't let you forget." The co-pilot waited, sensing that there was more. Viper breathed slowly. "Years ago, I was on a mission, a training flight. That wasn't supposed to be dangerous. The weather turned, the equipment failed, and the sky changed so fast we barely had seconds to react. My wingman," he stopped suddenly, the memory hitting him like a silent wave. The co-pilot didn't push. He let the silence sit. Viper continued quietly. "We got separated. I tried to reach him, tried everything. But the sky swallowed him before help could find us." He paused again, this time longer. "I never forgave myself. Not because I made a mistake, but because I survived and he didn't." The co-pilot lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry," Viper shook his head. "It's not about sympathy. It's about why I stopped flying. The sky stopped feeling like home, until today." The co-pilot asked softly. Viper looked at him for the first time. "Today. It feels like the sky is giving me one more chance." Before the co-pilot could respond, the plane trembled again. A softer shake this time, like the sky tapping gently to remind them that their work wasn't finished. They approached the second system, a large, shifting mass of wind and thin clouds. Not a storm, but a space where air pressure changed unpredictably. The kind that could pull the plane off its glide path or force a sudden descent. Viper studied it with sharp eyes. "We're not going through it," he said. "We'll slide along its edge. Is that safer?" The co-pilot whispered. "It's smarter," Viper replied. "Safer depends on us." He angled the controls, guiding the plane toward the outer ring of the system. The air grew thin, tense. The plane tilted slightly left. The co-pilot watched the altitude numbers shift slowly, as if the sky was resisting their movement. In the cabin, the passengers felt the slow tilt too. People looked around nervously, clutching their seats. The baby cried again, and someone whispered, "Not again." "Please," the attendant made a calm announcement. "We are adjusting our path. It's normal. Please remain seated." But people didn't feel normal. Every sound felt louder, every movement sharper. Inside the cockpit, Viper leaned forward. "A bit more power," he murmured. The co-pilot adjusted the engines. The plane steadied for a moment, then a sudden gust pushed it downward. Passengers gasped as their stomachs lifted. The co-pilot panicked. "We're dropping." "No," Viper said calmly. "We're riding the edge. Hold steady." Another gust pushed from the right. The wings strained. The cabin rattled. Someone shouted in fear. The co-pilot's hands shook slightly. "We should pull up. If we pull now, we'll fight the wind," Viper said. "Let the wind pass." The plane dipped again, but Viper did not move a muscle. He waited, and then gently lifted the controls half an inch. The plane responded slowly at first, then smoothly rising back to its path. The shaking eased, the altitude settled. The warning flickers stopped. The co-pilot stared at him in disbelief. "How did you know the wind would ease?" Viper exhaled. "Because this is exactly the kind of sky that took my wingmen." He paused. "And I promised myself if I ever met a sky like this again, I would not lose anyone." The co-pilot felt a chill, not from fear, but from the weight of that promise. Outside, the sky began to clear again. A thin line of sunlight appeared above the clouds, golden and calm. The plane's wing caught the light, sending a soft glow. Across the entire side of the aircraft, inside the cabin, people lifted their heads. Mothers hugged their children. Strangers exchanged relieved looks. A man whispered, "We're okay. We're actually okay." Back in the cockpit, Viper checked the instruments again. "We're stable," he said, a quiet relief in his voice. But then the radio crackled one more time. "Be advised, Viper. Ground control needs to confirm something with you before landing. We're receiving a request linked to your call sign." The co-pilot frowned. "A request? What kind?" "Viper's." Eyes tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. He knew exactly what kind, and whatever it was. It was going to change everything. The cockpit went silent when the radio message ended. The co-pilot looked at Viper, confused, waiting for him to explain. But Viper didn't speak. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, his expression calm on the surface but carrying something heavy beneath it, something old, something he never expected to face again. The radio crackled once more. "Viper, confirm if you can receive. We have a priority communication linked to your call sign. Please respond." The co-pilot swallowed. What kind of priority communication do they mean? Viper finally answered, but his voice was quiet, almost distant. "There's only one type linked to my call sign now. What is it?" He didn't look away from the sky. "The military." The co-pilot blinked. "Because you're a former pilot?" "Because I disappeared," Viper said softly. "I left without ceremony, without final flights, without goodbyes." The co-pilot froze. "You walked away from everything?" Viper nodded once. "When my wingman died, I couldn't keep going. I didn't want the sky anymore. So I left. I changed everything about my life. No interviews, no addresses, no contact. Just gone." The co-pilot stared at him like he was hearing the final piece of a story that never made sense until now. "And now they know you're up here," he whispered. "Yes," Viper replied. "The moment you used my call sign on the radio, every old file connected to it lit up." The co-pilot exhaled shakily. "What are they going to do?" Viper didn't answer right away. He adjusted the controls gently, guiding the plane toward the clearer patch of sky ahead. The sunlight grew stronger, giving everything a soft, warm glow. The passengers seemed calmer, unaware of the storm now moving through the cockpit. Instead of the sky. Another message came through, this time with a different tone. More direct, more personal. "Viper, this is Control Tower Echo 1. If you can hear this, we want to speak with you directly. We have information you need to know." The co-pilot looked at him again. "They sound serious." "They always sound serious," Viper said. "But they wouldn't request direct contact unless—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "Unless it's about someone from my past." The co-pilot hesitated. "Should we answer?" Viper didn't speak for a moment. He pressed 2 fingers against the edge of the control panel, tracing the metal lightly. It was a small gesture, but it carried years of buried memories. Then he pressed the communication button. "This is Viper," he said, his voice calm but with a tremor underneath. "Go ahead." There was silence on the other end for a heartbeat. Then a voice, older, familiar, filled the cockpit speaker. "Viper, you're alive." The co-pilot's eyes widened. Viper closed his eyes for just a moment, recognizing the voice of someone he never thought he would hear again. "Commander?" Viper whispered. "Yes," the voice replied, emotional but controlled. "We thought we lost you all these years. And today your signal appears from a passenger flight. That is something." Viper took a slow breath. "I left for a reason." "I know," the commander said gently. "I respected your silence, but there is something you need to hear now. Something about your wingman." The cockpit air tightened. Instantly, Viper's hand froze over the throttle. "My wingman?" He whispered. "Double quotes, yes," the commander said. "The final report. We recently updated it. There was new data." He didn't go down because of you. There was a system fault in his jet that no one discovered until this year. Viper blinked. The world around him blurred for a second, the sky, the controls, even the co-pilot's face. You're telling me it wasn't my mistake? Viper asked, his voice barely audible. It was never yours, the commander replied. You carried blame that didn't belong to you. The co-pilot felt his throat tighten as he watched Viper freeze like a man whose chains had just been unlocked. After years of silence, but the commander wasn't finished. And Viper, your wingman's family asked us something, the voice continued. If we ever found you again, they wanted one message delivered to you. Viper swallowed. What message? They said, tell him he did everything he could. Tell him we don't blame him. Tell him we're proud he survived. The words hit Viper like a warm wave breaking open inside him. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Relief, forgiveness, release. The co-pilot looked away respectfully, giving him a moment. After a long silence, Viper pressed the button again. Thank you, he whispered. We're glad you're alive, the commander replied. Bring those passengers home, Viper. We'll be waiting on the ground. The radio went quiet. Viper wiped his eyes subtly, not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet human moment of healing. He inhaled slowly, letting the weight he carried for years finally lift from his chest. The co-pilot smiled gently. You okay? For the first time, Viper actually smiled back, soft, real, almost peaceful. I think, he whispered, I'm finally ready to fly again. But just as that peace settled, the plane made a sudden sharp dip. Warnings lit up again. This time, it wasn't weather. It was something mechanical. Something serious. And they were minutes away from descent. The sharp dip came without warning. No thunder, no wind, no flashing cloud. Just a sudden heavy pull downward that made every passenger cry out at the same time. The lights flickered, the oxygen masks shook slightly, and a deep rumble passed under the floor. Inside the cockpit, alarms lit up like a row of red stars. The co-pilot's voice cracked. We just lost partial hydraulic pressure. Viper's eyes flashed with focus, not panic focus. The kind a person has when everything inside them becomes sharp and calm at the same time. Which side? He asked. Left. Controls are becoming heavy. Viper placed both hands on the yoke and felt the resistance. It was real. The plane still responded, but slower, like trying to move a sleeping giant. Passengers in the cabin felt the tilt. The fear spread again. People grabbed seats, clung to loved ones, whispered prayers. Someone shouted, "What's happening?" The attendants tried their best to calm everyone, but their own faces showed worry now. Viper tested the controls. "Again, we can still land," he said quietly. "But it has to be perfect." The co-pilot nodded, pale. "Runway is ready. Emergency crews are waiting." Viper looked out at the sky, clear, bright, almost peaceful. It didn't match the chaos inside the plane. "We'll bring them down gently," he said. "Stick with me." The co-pilot swallowed hard. "I trust you." The descent began. The plane moved slowly at first, then steadier as Viper guided it with precise, careful pressure. Every adjustment felt heavier, every movement slower, but he remained calm, breathing evenly. "Tell the cabin to prepare," he said. Moments later, his voice came through the speakers. Soft and steady. "This is Viper. We're going to land. Now stay seated, keep your heads down, and trust me. We're going home." Passengers didn't know the details. They didn't understand hydraulics or control pressure. But they heard his tone, strong, calm, human, and something inside them believed him. The runway came into view, long, bright, lined with flashing emergency lights. Viper narrowed his eyes. "We aimed for the middle," he murmured. The co-pilot managed a tense smile. "Yes, sir." The plane descended lower. A slight shake ran through the wings. People squeezed their eyes shut. Someone whispered, Please. Please. Viper tightened his grip. Come on, stay with me. The wheels drew closer to the ground. A warning chirped, hydraulics weakening again. The co-pilot held his breath. It's dropping too fast. Viper didn't panic. He pushed the nose up gently, fighting the heavy controls. Not today, he whispered to the aircraft. Not while I'm here. The plane leveled, steadied, and dash thumped. The wheels touched. Hard, but controlled. Another shake. Then the nose gear. The whole aircraft roared as the brakes engaged unevenly. The co-pilot fought the rudder pedals. The plane veered slightly left. Viper corrected immediately, using slow, firm pressure. The plane groaned, tires squealing, but it stayed on the runway. People screamed. Then quiet. Then the plane slowed. Slowed. And finally stopped. Silence. Then the cabin erupted in cries, not of fear, but of relief. People sobbed, hugged each other, held their faces in their hands. A woman thanked God out loud. A man shouted, "We're alive!" The attendants fell into each other's arms, shaking. The co-pilot leaned back, trembling. You did it. Viper shook his head gently. We did it. Fire trucks and ambulances raced toward them, lights flashing, but Viper didn't look at them yet. He sat still for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the reality settle. The co-pilot looked at him carefully. Are you going to disappear again? Viper gave a small, soft smile, one that held years of pain, years of silence, and the first light of healing. No, he said. Not this time. Outside the cockpit, the door opened. The flight attendants stood there, eyes wet, faces full of gratitude and disbelief. One of them whispered, "Sir, the passengers want to thank you." Viper stood slowly, steady now. No fear in his posture. He walked into the cabin, and the moment people saw him, they burst into applause, loud, emotional, endless. Some reached for his hand. Some whispered blessings. Some just stared at him like he was something out of a story they would tell forever. He didn't wave. He didn't make a speech. He only nodded gently, humbly, quietly, like someone who had finally found peace with the sky again. And when he stepped off the plane, the ground crew was waiting. So was the military team, not to take him back, not to force him into anything, but simply to welcome him home. For the first time in years, Viper lifted his face to the open air, feeling no guilt, no fear, no weight pulling him down. Just the sky. The same sky he once ran from. The same sky he saved people under today. The same sky he finally forgave. And maybe, just maybe, it forgave him too.